Okay, good morning, Greg, on this wonderful Tuesday morning that we're recording this, which this will actually be our 200th Left of Greg episode. So I don't
You
know
got to
if
be
you,
kidding.
yeah, I don't know if you realize that, but
That's
I,
I have no
I,
idea.
I just realized
Absolutely.
it now, actually,
Wow, is
before we
that
got on.
wonderful?
Yeah, yeah.
We got to do
So,
some kind of celebration.
okay,
Yay!
yeah,
That's it. We, yeah,
pat ourselves on the back.
exactly.
Actually,
I can't reach my back, but
we should be celebrating our listeners. So thank you, folks. The only reason why we continue to do the show is because we have people listening. So that,
both of
yeah,
you should be applauded.
yeah, and we've had 200th episode and 200 total downloads of all episodes. No, I'm kidding.
Aw,
I'm kidding.
exactly.
We
Isn't
have,
that nice?
I don't know, we have over
And I accounted
100,000.
for 160 of those.
Yeah, I
So
was like, we have 100,000 downloads at least. But anyway,
yeah,
today, on that anniversary, I
yeah,
guess we're sort of wanted to discuss with you
something that
um,
has nothing to
nothing
do
to
with
do with that.
anniversaries whatsoever.
Nothing to do with it being our
We're
200th
known for our
episode.
segues,
The
right?
number of 200 or anything. I thought about that. I was like, oh, should we do something special? But we had already had this plan, so I was like, whatever. So
Perfect.
anyway, here we are. We're talking about I guess home is where the heart is, Greg. And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is we're gonna talk about the psychological and sociological factors
Yeah.
in what we call our home and what it means to us. And obviously, if you listen to the show, there's going to be a point to this, and we're going to get somewhere with it. But I want to start. Well,
Perhaps.
I want to. Well, sometimes. So,
Exactly.
but I want to start with that sort
Yeah.
of description because it's extremely powerful. And what I mean by it is, what we call our home, our actual house, apartment, car, tent on the street, whatever you're living in and tuning into this right now, your home is obviously, it's extremely valuable and important to you, far more than sometimes we even realize, meaning it becomes our safe space, right? It becomes our place. It's only for us. We get to pick and choose who we allow into our home. And I think sometimes, we forget about that when some incidents occur at someone's house,
Yep.
just how
Yep.
emotionally charged those are instantly there every single time. Like, I always make the joke, like, even when I know I'm getting a package delivered and a clearly marked Amazon delivery truck with the same driver I've seen come every time, even when that's
Right.
pulling up to my house and I see, I'm like, hey, what's going on here? Who is this coming in? Is it they, like, I know it is, like, I'm not like hyper
Yep.
vigilant, but I still have a little bit of that anxiety in the background, right? And that extends to anything. When we talk about how people show ownership of different things,
Hmm.
one example is like, if you come walking out of the restaurant or the bar, and there's someone out there and they got their foot up on your car, you're gonna be pissed immediately, right? Because they're
Furious.
showing
Yeah.
ownership. But think about that too, is like, even when someone's at your house and you don't know them very well, and they put their foot up on your front step, it doesn't matter what it is.
Right.
Like, even if they don't realize it, like, you take pride in it and you take ownership of it, and it feels like they're stepping on you. That's yours. You own that. That's part of who you are, right? It's no different than extends to our even vehicles sometimes. Why people get so pissed about getting cut off on the freeway, or someone jumps in and that's my lane. It's like, dude, it's not your lane. It's everyone's lane. But
So true,
but
though.
but I just want to talk about a little bit about that, Greg, and kind of set it up to
Yeah.
get into where we're going here. But it's something we take it for granted. People go, yeah, obviously that's your home. It's like, no, no, no. This has roots back to when we were living in caves. I mean,
It's
this
exactly true. So,
absolutely
so
tied to survival.
Brian, we normally talk about things under the guise of baselines, and then we talk
Yeah,
about psychological or physiological or
sociological.
sociological. But
Yeah,
we also warn people that it could be financial, it could be
yeah.
fiduciary.
What?
There's relationships all over, and you got to take a step back sometime and see that relationship. So, how important do you think this topic is? That law has a thing called the castle doctrine. The
Right.
principle says that an individual has the right to use
Wait,
reasonable force up to deadly force to protect themselves against an intruder
and
inside
and
their home.
and just to think about even the title of it, Greg, like, that
Yes,
law was written
your
long,
home,
long after anyone's
exactly.
been living in castles. You know what
But
I'm
your
saying?
home
Like,
is your castle. It could have
yeah,
easily been called the cave.
yeah.
Think about all the laws that you've read. Look, you were always interested in law well
Sometimes,
before. Yeah,
sometimes,
some for the wrong reason, looking over your shoulder.
sometimes
But
unwillingly.
Think about how
Yeah.
many capers that we looked at where the curtilage of the property was at question, whether
Right.
you're on the porch, whether you make an observation from the porch, where's
From
the
the
protected area, right?
yeah.
That you had a
Uh,
right, are you,
where
you,
specifically are you on the sidewalk in front of
exactly.
someone's home, or are you on their actual front lawn, or is it the
There's
parkway
such,
in front? In that city technically controls that. They're
exactly.
getting very specific. Yeah.
But why would we spend so much time on litigation and legal process and having people develop if it wasn't something that matters to every one of us? And I'll throw this at you. You and I both know that a home is more than a house, but a home depends on your psychology, your
Yeah.
emotion. So you could say that box along the railroad tracks is your home.
And
That's where all my shit is.
and
That's
legally,
where I go every day,
we've
right?
seen cases where
Many
that's actually
cases.
stood up in court, where
Yep.
no, even though the person was homeless, or
You're
living in a
transient.
cardboard box,
Exactly. Yeah.
that became for legal purposes their home, which means you couldn't search it, or someone
Right.
intruded into their home. So it's extremely powerful.
Yeah. No, no. And we're saying here that you have the right to defend your property within that box. Okay. When somebody else interferes with it, obviously that's not
So
a deadly force situation, but there's interference means, look, I have to have some place. This is what we miss sometimes when we talk about the homeless situation. Many times homeless is mental health, right? But
right.
many times homeless is something like an addictive personality.
Yeah.
And I know I don't want to get arrested by the woke police, whatever you talk about. But if the person's on fentanyl or this or that, and somebody threw them over, or something did somebody to something, and now all of a sudden you're without a home. That's what
Right.
we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Well, the stakes are higher now, aren't they? And Brian, I would venture that if you have a dog, the stakes are even psychologically and emotionally much higher. And now, what if you have a kid? Or what if you have a significant
Right.
other, right? So see, we don't sometimes think about that, and we think nothing of giving somebody the brush off or the shove off. You know what I'm saying? That's in that situation, and then when that person barks back or bites,
Yeah.
now we're surprised by it for some reason. I
No,
I
no,
think
and
there's a direct correlation between
there
those.
is, and that's why we with most of the stuff we discuss, we tie a lot of it back to some sort of primal survival
Yeah.
system, way of looking at it. Why? Because that's relatively unchanged. Meaning, your health and safety, your where you live and how you survive is extremely important to you. It's encoded and embedded in your DNA and running in the
Yes.
background without you even realizing it. So that extends directly to where you live and what you call yours and your home. And so and what I'm this is kind of what we're getting to some of the examples of it here now, but I have to take a step back and think about that for a second when I'm
Yep.
going to someone's home. Meaning that it because maybe you have a role where that's something you do often.
Yeah.
You're a first responder, you're in law enforcement or something like that. You take it for granted because why? You go to people's homes all the time. Half the time they call you to come there, right?
Exactly.
So the
Exactly.
idea is, we can sort of brush past that, like you said, and not take into account, like, wait a minute, I'm going into someone's cave right now. I don't know what's in that cave, and I don't know what their psychological state is. I mean, how many times have we seen, different, sheriff's deputies in different places all over the United States go to evict someone because they can't
Yes.
pay, their for where they're living, and they get shot or killed, or the person ends up getting shot or killed because there's some sort of fight or ensues with a weapon or without. It
Yes.
doesn't matter. It's because it's such a highly charged situation, and meanwhile the sheriff's deputies probably rolling their eyes like, oh great, I got to go evict someone. One, they probably don't want to. Who wants to kick someone on the street? Two,
Yep.
they're like, hey, I've got seven other things I was directed to do today, right? You know what I'm saying? And I don't want to have to do this. Three, hey, this is private property anyway. Why are we enforcing the laws here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot that's in there. So we tend to not put a lot of value, or we don't recognize the potential for extremely bad things to happen in those. I mean, and that's going to anyone's house when anything's happening. Like, I I've been in situations with my wife before. We're visiting people, and they're like kind of like starting to get in an argument. Like, I'm out, man. Like, I don't want to be there. I don't know like what else they have going on in their life,
Yeah.
and we're
Yeah.
in their cave right now. And if something goes south, and they might turn that anger towards, me, whatever the situation, everything might be fine 1 minute and then it escalates because something else is going on. And simply due to the geographic location, simply due
Yep.
being in their home, one, they're more comfortable to do things that they wouldn't do in public. They're more comfortable to say and act in certain ways that they
Yep.
wouldn't outside of that home. And I'm in there. I'm in there. So if it gets confrontational, it gets very confrontational
And it goes
very
fast.
quickly. Yeah,
Of
very
course.
quickly.
So let's go white belt. Let me street it up. Let me talk about geographic, something you've witnessed me do. So and you've done it
Yeah,
yourself, but I mean the
once or twice.
very early on when you were still learning some of the ropes that I look. Brian's a subject matter expert in his own right, but Brian and I spent a lot of time developing each other. And before
Yeah,
that, Brian
yeah,
had T3s and different mentorships and stuff. So I'll take you back to when you would go with me and watch me during lunch manipulate somebody at lunch by very slowly changing the geographics of the table. And
right.
what I would do is I would first put the salt and pepper shaker over. Then I would open my menu and make a big point of putting that on that person's side.
Yeah,
And
then
then I would move whatever
slowly
the
like
table into
take a
a
drink
little
of
bit.
water and then
Yes.
then put your glass out a little bit farther than it was, spread your
Okay.
silverware out, like all
So
of a
what did
sudden,
we
yeah,
call that?
because
I
a little territorial encroachment there.
Now,
Yeah,
when I would take a little bit of the territory, at
yeah.
first the person, and remember, we were doing this as a limited objective experiment. So at first the people would go, "Oh, it's just a big guy.
Well,
He's
yeah,
just
and you're
bombastic. He's
talking
just pushing around."
fast, and you're not even
Exactly.
they're not even
And so
noticing it
I'm
first, and then they
now
kind of are, but they're like, oh,
right.
it's yeah,
I'm going with it, and they're not getting mad. And then all of a sudden, there's always that point where the person goes, "Hey, what the fuck is going on?" And
yeah, exactly.
they want their space back. And the biggest change was Don Yeager. You saw that when we
He's
did it to Don
get
Yeager in
angry.
California,
Yeah,
and he lost his mind. And the idea was, okay, then we had to back it up. And listen, you can't just say you can't invoke the words of it's a limited objective experiment unless you started that. So we were
yeah,
in the car going, okay, now we're going to go in this restaurant. We're going to do this. This person is unaware of that they're
yeah.
the test subject, right? Because if you don't do that, Brian, then what you're doing is you're just randomly covering your ass
Pissing people
by yelling
off.
at, right?
Yeah,
So the encroachment was to demonstrate that even in a temporary, transient space, you have an expectation of personal privacy. And what happens when somebody intrudes into that space, even for a small period of time, like people always think, Brian, that they've got more rights with their vehicle than they do. And
yeah,
so a person stops a vehicle and, hey, I need you to step out. I'm not stepping out of the car. I need you to put it in park. I'm not going to put it in park. I need you to roll down your window. No, because the motor vehicle code has exceptions because a motor vehicle is inherently transient. And guess what? It's on the roads by the will and whim of the state, not you. You don't have the
yeah.
right. Your driver's license is not a right that's conveyed, right? But we get into that on another episode. But the idea, though, is that people wrongly sometimes think that they have a possessory interest that's greater than they do, or they have rules and laws that govern things that they don't. But when we come to a house or your property or your like vicinity, the area that you occupy, there's a lot of case law that protects you on that, and it's historically significant that you remember when you're going to that call or when you're going to step in. Like even a teacher with a locker. How many episodes did we have to do on that? That teachers have the absolute right to go into the kid's
Yeah.
locker, right?
Yeah.
And they were saying like, well, that seems like a protected area. No, you're the school. You
Yeah.
administrate the school.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
student's a part-time,
You have a right.
lender,
Their
right?
safety is your a right and responsibility that you have.
Tantamount.
Like
Exactly.
yeah. So no,
So I would tell you that anytime, no matter if you're a civilian or if you're given a legal responsibility to a space like a teacher, HR, a janitor, something like that, you should separate normal stress, reasonable stress, let's call it, to high stress. And anytime that you're kicking anybody out of anything, anytime that you're grabbing something and throwing it away, I remember one relationship that I was with where the person did the up over the railing, everything out. You get what I'm trying to say?
oh yeah.
Remember Stripes at the very beginning of Stripes? They have that same type of situation. Feel that once. And I'll tell you a couple of white belt films that you can look, and they're comedies, but the idea is that you'll get into the emotion. It's right there. One is Mel Brooks. I'm a fan of Mel Brooks, everything. But Life Stinks. Mel Brooks takes to the street and he gets a completely different perspective of what it's like being on the street. The other is Be Kind, Rewind. it's kind of about gentrification, but it's the same basic principle of somebody trying to boot you out of something that you think
Yeah.
is yours, right?
So
And then they come down and they draw a line in the sand and go, oh, by the way, you've got 6 weeks to either do all of these things that you can't afford or get out. That time, Brian, that clock ticking in the back of your head is horrible.
it
It's a terrible feeling.
it is, and it can, so for a lot of people, it can become their only thing that they have in life is that small space or
Right?
large space, doesn't matter what it is, that they can call their own and go to.
Yep.
So this is kind of leading us to what I know everyone's not like, with okay, what the hell are you getting at? There's an element of emotion in these events that we
Yeah.
don't always take into consideration, or we overlook or take for granted, right? And especially if you have the power to do something like that, where you have to execute a search warrant or an
Yeah.
arrest warrant, or you have to deliver, you're writing code enforcement for the city,
Yep.
whatever it is, and you have the right to post something on someone's door, or go in and speak to them, or come onto their property to whatever, announce something, deliver something. It doesn't matter what it is, because you do that over time, and things just go according to plan most of the time. We forget about that emotional and psychological element in there that causes these situations to spiral wildly out of control. So we have to take the temperature of this, and there's
That's so
countless
true.
of examples of just some seemingly benign situation that spirals wildly out of control, and everyone understands that, especially with like a domestic violence situation, or that those can be highly charged. But do we actually plan and put a plan
No.
or implement something into this?
No,
You know
no.
what I'm
And
saying?
what you
And
said, I would tell everybody, Brian, to take a step back to what Brian just said and write down, taking the temperature of the room. How many times do we tell people during training, take the temperature of the person you're talking to, take the temperature of the vehicle on a traffic stop, take the temperature of the crowd? And what do we mean by that, Brian? What we mean is, are things okay? We're talking about psychological triage, aren't we?
right.
The sociological impact of the people that are watching and filming you. What does it feel like? Because your body and your brain are attuned to the survival instincts, and you know that things aren't always what they seem. So you need to give that gift of time and distance and feel. Yeah, we also call it reading the tea leaves, right? We want you to look at the emotion, and then what else do you have to understand? You have to understand the hidden underpinnings, Brian. You have to
Right.
understand, like, for example, I would say there's a critical time for a cop from the time they get the dispatch that there's a domestic violence incident, and like in Colorado, those are code 3. You run hot, you run lights and sirens to a domestic violence. Okay, that's the law. That's how you do that, and that's very different in some places how you do that. So now you're on the way to that, and let's say it takes you 3 minutes to respond. Brian, how much shit can go wrong in a
Oh
kitchen in
yeah.
3 minutes in a highly agitated, very dangerous, emotional situation like a family fight? You get what I mean? So now what you knew to be certain, what you suspected because your psychology is going to be messing with you, and then all of a sudden you're there now. It's very different, and so that's very, like, in combat. You expect to be shot at. You
Right.
expect somebody to have a
Right.
minefield. You
Yeah.
expect there to be a,
There's
a,
yeah.
a fence or an obstacle that you might have to cross, right? And
Hmm.
and so you can take those into account, but you don't know these. Look, an armed robbery call. Is it an inside job? Is the person armed with a gun? Is it a knife? Is it just a note? Those calls and domestic violence, to me, that's the balance right there. That's the ones where you don't know shit, and you got to learn very quickly what's going to go on because of the most dangerous.
No, and any of those situations, even among family or friends or something, I had heard some folks that we had known, like, hey, did you hear so and so, they're getting divorced? I'm like, wait, what? They just got
Right?
married like 6 months ago. Yeah, like, and she's already moved out back with her family. I was like, wait, what? Like, that's something abrupt is
Yep.
so outside the norm, what I mean, and
Yep.
so quick and so fast that it's very volatile. So it's like, okay, well, we need to make sure so and so is contacted, and make sure can we find out about this because they have a child and what's going on, because
Yes.
it's such a it's not typically how those things go. Sure, divorces happen, people split up, there's all kinds of different reasons. It's not about that. It's about the manner in which it happened
You're
was
exactly
so
right.
abrupt, right?
So add the complexity to that. Listen, folks, Brian is on something here. Add to the complexity of that. You, as a family member, as a community social worker, as a copper, you're going to respond to the scene to find out, hey, do you need anything? I know you guys are splitting up or whatever else. Brian, do you have any friends or anybody that you know that lives close by, like across the street or next to another family member?
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
huge in
Yeah.
Chicago.
Yeah.
It's huge in Detroit. So now think about walking up on this porch, and what you don't understand is the estranged husband or wife is right next door. And they're with the uncle that sides with them. And across the street is the mom and dad that bought you the house. And now look what you did to my daughter. Do you understand how that can spin sideways really, really quickly and you never see it coming? That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about having a plan for those. Do you have a plan for driving on ice? I do. Okay. So why
Well,
wouldn't you have a plan for responding to this
okay,
type of
so
a situation?
you brought up some key elements. Those are the things that we look for, right? Is in all of these situations, it's okay. What can I before I go to intervene, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
intervene, whether that's my duty as because of my job, or I'm a family member, or I'm a friend, or I'm a neighbor. Before I go to
Yep.
intervene, what elements of this story do I know? Meaning, what other things are there that I know? I mean, simply just going, oh, did you hear so and so got divorced? Oh, that's horrible. I didn't know anything was going on. No, 5 months after they got married and she's already moved out, and it's like, whoa, wait, like
Yep.
it's a comparison to what typically happens versus this. So if I know what typically happens and what's gone right, what can I see that's different? And in a lot of these cases, especially when you talk about highly charged domestic violence situations, where now, especially with law enforcement agencies they're trying to use like psychologists to come in and do stuff,
All
and
right.
that's well intentioned, but could potentially go horribly wrong. I actually think the probably the officer on the beat has a better advantage using that situation, maybe with a
Yep.
little bit of extra training or a little bit of understanding, and so you get what
Exactly.
I'm saying, versus bringing in this person, because that person is only thinking of it from one lane and one lens, and that's it. So they could that could cause them to miss something. Do you get what I'm saying?
You're right
Because
on track again, but I would say this to add to what you're saying. I would reinforce your fires by saying in almost every circumstance where you encounter, for example, a shoplifter, or you encounter a sneak thief, or somebody
hmm
just at a street robbery, or somebody's messing with your vehicle and you come out and you
someone's
go,
trying to
"Hey,
come up, yeah.
okay, flee." Okay, almost every circumstance is a flea. But we started off this episode talking about the house. The
Yep.
home is somehow different. Now all of a sudden, hey, I'm flat-footed. Hey, this is my house. You
Yeah.
walked into my house. And so now, even that short duration that you're in that place, Brian, you again feel as though you have a possessory interest. And now all of a sudden somebody tells you this kind of stuff in your own home. Go sit over there. Shut your mouth. Step back for a minute. Okay,
You
you're naturally going to have a heightened level of emotion, but it's more than emotion. I'm searching here, folks, for a word because it's a different kind of emotion. Like
y-
German language and Inuit Eskimos have all these different words for this stuff. In English, we don't have the right word for the rage that boils in your gut when you're in your own home and somebody
and
tells you to shut up and sit
well,
down.
that's the thing, is what you start doing is you start taking away my options, right?
Yes,
Even if I didn't have any because of the situation, like
yes,
if I feel like I have some options, then I do. Meaning
yes.
the difference of being actually cornered and not being able to do thing is different than feeling that way, but not to your brain if you're feeling that way. It
Right.
doesn't
And,
matter.
and
Like,
and
so
fantasy and
you're Greg,
reality are the same,
Greg,
right?
you're looking at it like, what do you mean?
Yes.
Like he could do this, he could do that. He's got all these options, but
Nope.
internally I'm going, this is it. This is it right here. If you're backing me into a corner, I have two options. I either go hands up and all right, what you're now in charge, Greg, and I'll do what you say,
Yes.
or we're fight. You know what I'm saying? And
So
whatever that
so
is.
and what are most if we're talking in the range of like a domestic, right? A domestic violence caper, a family fight, as they used to say in the old days. What are we talking about? We're talking about a realm of control. We're talking about I
Right.
lost control of the finances. You called me on it. I had a couple of beers after work. Now that's what we're fighting about. And don't raise your voice in front of the kid. Now, I feel that loss of control tangibly. I feel it. Like I can reach out and hold it. And we know in cop work, and it's very same across the board for anybody that's in anything related, court, cops, corrections, emergency rooms. The two most dangerous times for any of those type of capers, whether it's a warrant service or an eviction, foreclosure, domestic violence, is always the approach to the scene and the arrest. Why the approach to the scene? Because defense 3-1 odds, urban 5-1 odds. I know you're coming. I know somebody called 911.
Right.
I know that when I blew that
The
front window out
the
by throwing the
odds are
Christmas
all in
tree
that
out.
person's favor.
Exactly. And I can hear the sirens are coming. So I now know that this has already gone past the inevitability point of no return, right? And the other thing is when you actually lay hands on somebody, that's a very different thing. There's some people out there that have been arrested before. For those of you that haven't been arrested, there's a phase. Okay, turn around, don't look at me. Okay, bend slightly at the waist. Okay, put your hands back, palms up, separate them a little
Yeah.
further. Now
Yeah,
separate your
there's
feet. Now don't, and you're going through this going like, what the F is going on? And now that first bracelet goes on. And there's a moment where you do the should I stay or should I go? And all humans do that. So if we
yeah.
know that that's coming, we can prepare for that. And I'm not talking about just arrest tactics, Brian. I'm talking about how can we psychologically de-escalate a situation that was probably unde-escalatable when we got there. That's what we're talking about. Those inevitable fights where, look, if you can't control your husband, wife, or significant other, and you can't control your finances, and you're going to lose your house, and you're going to lose all the shit, and now I'm there, and guess what? The first thing I tell you to do: calm down,
Yeah.
okay, and then I tell you to shut up, right? Because you're
Well,
vocalizing too loud for everybody else. Think of that. You're talking about a cauldron. You're talking about a powder keg
it
that's
is
ready to
because
blow.
if I'm that person in that state, eh, both physical and
Yep.
psychological and financial state, whatever it is,
Yep.
like I will look for something I can control. And man,
Yes,
that's why, like you always say, violence is a language. And
it is.
I can control that message. I can control
Yep.
that message very easily. And I can do it when I want to do it. And it's always there. It's primed to me as a human being. When I start to feel overwhelmed, I'm gonna lash out, right? If I
Yes.
don't have any other options, I'm going to choose my survival over anything else, over
You're
yours,
exactly
right?
right.
It's always on the table, no matter who the person is. It could be Mother Teresa, right? It's
Yes.
still on the table, right? The Pope punched a guy after he's what did he threw.
We used that in class because I was
Yeah,
so amazed that the coach reached across and slapped that guy
yeah,
so hard, and the woman was holding on to his hand, and he pushed her.
yeah.
It was a
So
melee.
so it
That's why it's
doesn't matter.
called a melee,
Well,
right?
and those things are on the table. So that it comes
Exactly.
into, you're walking into that is the first thing is do I need to walk into this, right? Is there a better place and time I can have this conversation or affect
Right.
this arrest warrant or
Right.
whatever the
So
situation is, right?
on a domestic, your timeline, you're spot on. On a domestic, your timeline is very restricted because you have to respond. Like I said, even in Colorado state statute, you must
Yep.
respond,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
emergent to the scene. So they're throwing you into this and saying, fix this. Okay. This is one of those situations where even if you had the counselor from community services and everything else, it's not going to end up well because do some of them allow you to talk your way through it? Yes, some of them will talk, but again, most of these domestic violence incidents aren't the first time. Okay, they're near the last time, if you know what I mean. And so it may be your first call to this house with this pair of people that you're talking to, or three, or whatever the dynamic is, but it's likely not their first time being responded to by the police.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? That means that you're ill prepared for the situation. So like they have TTPs, and you know my thoughts about TTPs, but the TTPs are separate the parties. I get it. Don't make them look at each other. Yeah, we're trying to get the rage to abate. Try to put them in different rooms. Well, that's really hard because if you don't have that extra officer, now the two officers
Yeah.
can't see each other. And guess what, Brian? Every house is replete with weapon systems. And if the
Everywhere.
person's a hunter, they've got a
Yeah.
gun. And if the person's
Oh,
threatened, they might go for the gun. I mean,
knives,
think about
sticks,
those.
bats, whatever. There's all kinds of stuff
Okay,
everywhere. Yeah.
and houses are how many videos did we watch in the last year, let's say, from right now, just the last 12 months, where the incident unfolded with a closed door or in the hallway facing a closed door, and there
Yep.
was a shooting, it was a
Yep.
homicide there. And so the idea is that it's not key terrain. It's not the greatest place to have this discussion. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to go in and go, okay, give me 2 minutes and I'll change the trajectory of your life? And set up a kitchen table where no knives and stuff are within reach, because there's snipers out there right
Boy,
now that are going,
if you don't,
the bread masher.
yeah,
Could you imagine that? And then sitting down at the table and saying, okay, we're going to search everybody. And now what we're going to do is talk. That's what's needed. What's
well, if you
needed
can
is a
even
calming of minds, and
something
let's talk
very
about,
simply of getting someone outside of their house is enough to at least reduce reduce it to a simmer rather than a boiling over. You get what I
right,
mean? Like
right.
those things, and it's part of what
But
I
now
was
I'm
getting into at the beginning of now.
exactly.
And I'm not saying this is something you can always do or whatever, but I just, from a psychological, sociological,
Yep.
survival perspective of human behavior and human performance, like, having a conversation outside of someone's house is very different than having it inside their house, even if
Right.
you're on their property, on their front lawn, right? I mean, it's, but that, because now that person has options. They can go back inside, right? They can do it. Now, I understand the situation. I'm just taking it from a human behavior, human performance
Yes.
perspective on what's the possibilities, the likelihood of events occurring.
Yeah,
You get what I'm saying?
exactly. You're not given a TTP. And the other thing is,
No,
we also have to remember that that approach from exiting your police vehicle to walking up to the front door is a very fatal funnel for coppers, because the person inside the house goes, well, this is inevitable. I'm going to jail. I know I have 2 strikes already or a warrant
yep,
for my arrest. And so they just start shooting. And cops don't anticipate that. And they go, well, I can't. I can't anticipate because I go on 19 domestic violence calls in a 3-day period. Well, look, you can, if you're going to give me statistics, listen to statistics. It's a
yeah,
high emotional state situation. I sent you a report which got me thinking about these things, and the report was that there were 1,000 suicides in a 5-year period just from
just
people
about.
that were given foreclosure
Foreclosure
notices.
notices, right,
Okay,
right.
and 75% of those people blew their brains out before the cops or
Yeah,
the bank ever showed up. Brian, they were just so
before anyone
overwhelmed by it.
enforced it even
So
is,
so what does that
yeah.
go to? So now imagine that person's getting out of their car, they're opening up the envelope, and they're going into Burger King for lunch. They're blindsided by it. They knew they were a little behind. They didn't understand that foreclosure was coming. Now there's a real date on it, Brian. And you're standing next to that person, and that person reading that letter bumps into you, and you go, "Hey, step off, motherfucker." Pardon the language, folks. I'm playing a role. Brian, what might happen then? See, if we can anticipate what might happen in public, in a public place, with a person whose cup is full, now put that person in their own home or in their
No,
apartment or
and
in
so,
their car.
no, no, and so
That's the complexity.
and then this gets into now the conversation, right? Is in those
Right.
moments in real time, what does predictive analysis look like? Because we're talking about all
Exactly.
this stuff, and you can 100% absolutely do that. There's countless
Yes.
examples. The one I just sent I didn't. I'm sorry, I actually didn't send you, but I told you about it. Was a unique, interesting one, and these are the type of things that we look at. I'll put the link in the episode details, but this was outside of Los Angeles, somewhere in California, and I forget the reason why they're pursuing this vehicle.
Yep.
And this guy's in a pickup truck, and he literally takes his rifle and comes out of the window and is shooting at the
Behind them.
police vehicles. Yeah,
Right.
just blasting away. And then he'd drive, and then he'd shoot again, then drive. And it's like, okay, this obviously is a huge threat to those officers. This guy's trying to kill them. This is attempted murder, right? He knows what he's doing.
Intent has been
Yeah.
demonstrated.
So as he's driving, but then he comes up to a busy intersection, and he doesn't blow through, he doesn't whip around the cars, he slows down, creeps up to the intersection, and then as a, kind of helicopter, I'm moving from that perspective, there's all these kids crossing the street like they just got out of school. So not like six, like, like 30 on each side. You know what I mean? As they
Right.
stream
Like a
across trying to
movie
get.
set.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And he
Central
stopped and
casting.
he waited, and then he creeped through the intersection, and then there was like a little break in the kids, and he still didn't go. He waited for like the stragglers at the end, right, to continue to cross
Right.
the street, and then he didn't gas it. He didn't slam on the accelerator. He just slowly drove away. And the reason why I'm talking about that is that
It's
it
hugely
demonstrates
important.
so much intent and shows you exactly what they're thinking. That
Yes.
individual, yes, they're committing multiple felonies as they're doing this,
Yes.
but despite whatever they actually are getting pursued for, whatever the initial arrest
That's
or
upon right.
yeah.
All the
So
rest.
this guy's needs to go to jail for the rest of his life for what he's doing. But the idea is, like, you look at what his intent is in that moment. He's not a threat to those people and to the public safety at large. Now, don't jump on me for saying that. You'll see what I'm getting at. But he's very clearly a threat to the police officer. So it shows what's going on inside their head and what they're likely going to do next. I can plan for that. One, if he's already shot at me, I can assume he's going to do it again. If he has to run or bail, he's going to likely either run until he can't run anymore. And then what? Well, he's already demonstrated the fact that he shot at police officers once. Is he likely to do it again? Absolutely, he's likely to do it
Right.
again, especially if he feels cornered. But is he a threat to that immediate public area? Okay, well, no, he hasn't actually shown that, right? He's demonstrated his intent
Certainly had the
numerous
opportunity
times.
for a hostage.
He
Certainly
could
had
have.
the opportunity to pull
He
into
could
the
have grabbed one
school.
of those kids,
Certainly, right?
anything. He had all those
Exactly.
opportunities. He chose not
Plowed
to.
through them if he
So
wanted to.
so that should inform you how you can
What the
react or
stakes are.
respond that
Yes.
that
Yes.
situation. How am I supposed to do that in real time, Greg? Right? Because we can break that down. Now I
Yeah.
don't expect to answer that on a 1 hour podcast, right?
Our
But
200th episode, you bastards.
yeah,
Right.
but this is it. This is what we do. The 200th
No,
episode.
no.
We answer here's the golden piece of the
This is
puzzle.
where we throw
This is
all this stuff in the fire and
yeah.
you quit listening.
So no, no,
Right.
no. But
No, you're on to something
do
here.
you see
So
what I'm
look,
getting at? Is what should I?
right.
How can I? What can I glean for that in the moment to make a better
Two things.
decision about how I approach it? Right.
Two things. Go back to white belt again. Always go to white belt. Why? Because the best I ever
In those
learned at a black
moments,
belt is going back to white belt.
yeah.
Okay. And I'll tell you this. Two films again, because you know how much I value films and music. Pulp Fiction, Christopher Walken. I had this watch
Oh yeah.
in my ass. Okay.
Your
Anybody that
Christopher
goes
Walken
through
sounds
that,
exactly like your Bill Clinton impression.
it sounds exactly like my Gilbert Gottfried. So the idea, Brian, is that that watch meant so much to him that he hid it in his ass, his prison wallet. Okay.
Yeah.
Stop for a minute. Think about that. Now,
Yeah.
let's go to Steve Martin and the Jerk. Steve Martin is cleaning up at the gas station, and the guy looked in the phone book randomly and picked out the name Nabin Johnson and is going to shoot Steve Martin. And the guy's missing and hitting the oil cans. So Steve Martin is looking around him and going, "It's the oil cans. Everybody save the oil cans." And he's moving the oil cans. One, have a clear picture of what's happening and understand that there's going to be distortions. For example, the longer a pursuit goes, the more reckless it becomes.
Yeah.
The sooner you stop that. Okay. Now, if those are facts that you have, then you can make theorems based on your facts that'll work in many situations, then apply it to the situation you're in. So Pythagoras didn't solve for X on everything. Pythagoras showed you the method to solve.
Yeah.
And that's why we're very old and very Greek. And somebody will say, well, that's a TTP. No, a TTP is only the how. It has nothing to do with the when. It has nothing to do with the why. So this is one of the situations where I need to, like, for example, I don't have to understand all the hardships you're facing to understand domestic violence.
Yes.
But I do have to understand that you may be willing to kill me to stay in your house 5 more minutes.
Just knowing what's at stake.
Unrealistic. Yes.
Yeah.
Understanding what's at stake and knowing that those things are in play, not only in play, but in the balance. So, for example, if you tried to make the custodial arrest at the scene where the person was with those children around the vehicle, I can imagine that tense moment for the cops.
Yeah.
Okay. That could have gone sideways very quickly.
Sideways. Yeah.
And everybody would have blamed somebody for that event. Thank God, calm heads prevailed on both the suspect and the police to say, okay, listen, you're the cops. I run from the cops. You're the cops. You need to catch me.
Yeah.
We're going to take this away to some other area where it occurred. Most people don't have the men's to do that. They don't have the smarts, the scruples to do that. And look, if you're a criminal, I'll give you an example. The bank robbery where the guys dressed like automatons and went around and shot up the whole place, and a bunch of cops and everybody said, oh, we learned so much about tactics. No, you know what we learned? We learned about human performance and human behavior. And we learned that there's some people out there that are willing to die for what they believe in or do. And whatever that debt is, you don't really truly understand right now. So what you have to do is, like for example, you quit smoking and you lose weight because you want to live a couple of more days of life. You reconnect with your family because you were an ass to your daughter and you want to see your grandkids. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
If we take time to do that in our private lives, why wouldn't we want to take time to do that in somebody else's private life? So we have to sort of see where that person might be on a scale and understand what might be at stake for that person. So now that homeless person that I come out and I spray with the hose because they're, screwing my business up, okay, there's more to it. And that means that, look, it's like a fly fishing knot, Brian. The worst way to do a fly fishing knot is pull anything. What you
Yeah.
want to do is make the knot bigger. And what that means is make it bigger spatially so you can see all of the lines leading into the knot. So why wouldn't you enlist the aid of others in the community? But what we do is we force officers into these situations, right? Literally at the point of a gun or at the barrel of anger or when rage and violence have already occurred. And then we expect them to be able to solve for X. That's not what Pythagoras was about, Brian. You see what I'm trying to say? There's a longer process, and we're not talking about that process. And that has to occur well before you ever get in a police car, well before you ever pin the badge on. That has to take place now in training and education, well before a call for service goes
Well,
out.
no, and you actually brought up a good point about you almost making it like a personal investment. Like, so you talk about it, what someone might do in their own life, and
Yes,
then you're talking about now dealing with another human being. You're almost personalizing it. Like, wait a minute, I might want to take the time to find out what else is going on here. It
yes,
may extend my life. I mean, literally taking a personal investment like you did with your own life, own family, well, in this individual, I mean, you don't know what you're going to get, and that might be that missing key piece that you go, wait a minute, that's a powerful indicator.
huh?
This one is different than the other ones I've been on because now I know that this person has no other options. There is nothing else. So the other
Exactly.
one where it's the first time you ever showed up at the house and someone's called because they're drunk and they're having a disagreement is different than this guy has a past history of this. There's maybe a warrant out or
Yep,
just he's just been paroled. Like those are very, very different situations. So as much of that information is more important taking the time to figure that out than it
yep.
is to go rushing into somewhere. And I know there's
And you
always
got to
that
go there.
balance there,
No,
but
it's more than a balance. It's an
yeah,
imperative, right?
yeah.
Because
Well, it
Brian, you
goes.
just said something a parolee. If you're a parolee and I come into the house, the first thing you see is my badge, and you go, "Here's my ride back to prison." So I've got to break that, and
Yeah.
I've got to say, "Hey, listen, whatever's going to come out of
It,
this, I'll tell you what. I'm not like all those other cops. I want to
it,
hear your story. You got to give it
and
time."
And well, it goes back to even what you just said about the example I brought about the pursuit, where the guy
Yep,
went slow and stopped for the kids crossing the street. You know, if, like you just said, if they had said, "All right, hey, now's our chance.
this is
He
it.
stopped
Push it.
right here.
Yep,
Let's get him now." Like he's gonna start shooting at you because he's
yes,
been shooting at you, and then who's gonna get hit now? I mean,
yep.
that's the whole thing. Is like it's seemingly difficult, or it seems like that's overwhelming to do in the situation, but it's actually
It's
not
not.
if
It
you
isn't.
understand how to slow down time and how to
So,
perceive things,
Brian, do we
then
have
you
hostage
make better decisions.
negotiators?
Of
Do we,
course,
do we
yeah,
have hostage?
yeah,
Okay, so why wouldn't we look at a situation for a domestic as having a domestic negotiator? And the
yeah.
reason is,
Well,
and
they're
you
trying
brought
to
it up,
do
and
that.
you're
Yeah,
very much at the beginning. Yeah, but I mean the coppers. The coppers going, look, I got better things to do. You don't, because the call you're on is the most important call of your life. Because if you do it wrong, people may die. And you're going, yeah, but it's just a simple, loud party. No, everything you do and the things you don't do matter. And you're exactly right. You have to take a look at that and say, okay, I need to take a knee. I need to get my head straight. I'm going to go into this situation. Now, my partner is younger, so I'm going to call a more experienced veteran. Or I'm going to tell these folks, look, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to take as much time as it takes to make sure we sort this out. But I'll tell you, I can't do everything. There's certain things the community is going to have to do. And I know you've heard that before, but listen to me. Let's try to get that. What you're doing is talking. And when we're talking, we're not shooting and we're not punching and we're not fighting, And
yeah,
the idea is that takes time. But we're not look, when you go into combat is much of a seesaw as anything. And the seesaw is up on one side, and that's civilian deaths and collateral damage and a lot of deaths on the force that's going in. Then it kind of evens off, and then it turns into an insurgency, and it goes the other way,
yeah,
where there's a lot less damage, but there's more collateral damage within a unit and insider threat. You get what I'm trying to say. So why, if we can apply that to combat, and history writers go back in for everything I can read about MacArthur and de Gaulle and Churchill and all the decisions they made. Brian, where's that book on response to domestic violence?
Yeah,
Where's that book
exactly.
on calming down? That's like Joe Reed. One of the greatest assets is Joe Reed, because Joe Reed wanted to blow his own brains out. So if I want to talk to somebody about suicidal ideation,
Yeah,
you know who I call? I call a subject matter expert. But we don't do that in this instance, do we? And we're not just talking and railing about domestic violence. We're talking about critical decisions under stress. And
that's what
you
it
you
is.
just said that you make much better decisions under stress if you're further away and you have more time. And I would add, if you have different opinions of subject matter experts that you can rely upon, and so that means tacit and experiential knowledge, right? So if I don't have that at the scene, I have to have it somewhere, and so I can either be at the scene and try to work time into it, or I can go, holy shit, this is a great thing we need to cover at the academy. This is a great place where, and those are the types of training and training films, and because
Well,
look what we do with the even the shoot don't shoot scenarios that
yeah,
have to
that's
do with domestics.
it.
Everybody pulls out a weapon, and
Yeah,
then we have the
yeah,
decision: drop it, and they do or they don't.
yeah.
That's not how they go every time.
No,
Come on.
well, that's not even exercising any type of critical thinking.
No, none whatsoever. I
it's
mean, it's a
it's
trigger pull or not,
it's a
right?
how fast are you responding to what's happening, and
Right.
that's unfortunate that people still see it that way and continue to make that stuff better.
The old
But
Jack in the Box.
what you're yeah what you're talking about when you went back to critical decisions under stress, and I think again, I you brought up the combat examples are great, but of course, it's easy to point to that and say, hey, that's an extremely volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environment. It's like, well, so the fuck is everyday life? And when
Of
you're under
course it
stress, like
is.
we don't we don't even see it as that. Like, what does it mean to be under stress? Well, you brought up a bunch of situations, like you're in a stressful, even if like, man, you could have great night's sleep, everything's going well in your marriage and life, and
Yep.
everything's happened. You just got promoted and everything's good, and you're like, man, I just set a PR on my 1 mile run time and my deadlift,
Yep.
and that it doesn't matter.
Yep.
Like, and you're walking into a stressful situation. So yes, you're at some optimal level of performance, but that doesn't mean you can't easily get overwhelmed. Not just because of what's happening and you're
So
distracted, and now I'm dealing with you, Greg, and something's
exactly.
going over here, and I miss the fact that this is super highly charged right now. I think it's at that calm situation because everyone just got
Yes.
quiet, but really it's everyone just got quiet because they're all about to do something. You see how that comes into play. So
Exactly.
so
So
it's those situations where we don't even realize, Greg, what you mean by
you're
decision making under stress, because someone's going to go, dude, I'm
that's
not stressed, I'm doing fine, I'm not the guy sitting there thinking about blowing my brains out every night, like I'm
exactly.
this. So
But but
it
but that's because we set them up for part task training or scenario based training. Some people do without taking into account everyday life. That's why I always say street it up, go white belt. So about 3 hours ago, I was overcome by emotion, overwhelmed by events, and I lost my mind. And so I had apologized to Shelly before she left the house because it was changing the trajectory of our day. So what happened? So the dog gets up decidedly early and decides, hey, it's a full moon. I got to go outside because the yard is full of animal friends to
yeah
play and frolic with. So it's 3:45. So I said, well, it's close enough to our 4 o'clock normal morning start, 04, right? So I said, okay, well, Shelly's going to take the dog out. I'll go down and get a workout in. I got a long workout on it. I felt great. I come up. There's no pressure whatsoever. I have a yogurt. I have some of my Metamucil, right? I come in and Shelly's got her glasses on and looking at her computer. And I go, here we go. Okay, because I know there's something
something up,
new.
yeah,
Okay, and she goes, hey, it's nothing. We got to go to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife site. We got to update our stamp and our this and that, because it's the annual thing for
yeah
going out and doing our antler hikes and fishing and all the fun stuff we do in Colorado. And I go, okay, well, this is the dilemma that I'm faced with. Brian, I hate computers. I understand nothing. I always mess up the computers. So Shelly's got her website
yeah
contact so she can access it at work, but I can't. She's got my password and my CV, my Colorado wildlife ID
yeah
number on there with her phone number. So all she did
oh,
is
I
because
gotcha.
we're a couple,
She
she's just
tried
got
to
it
fill
mixed
your
and
stuff
matched.
out too, yeah.
But now I'm on my computer and
Yeah,
I can't get in with my own password.
yeah.
Brian, how long have you known me? So I that was it. And I
Yeah,
lost my mind and I'm pre-table tipping. I don't
yeah.
want coffee. This is bullshit. Okay. And then all of a sudden I look at myself and I go, what did I
What
just
the
let
fuck
happen?
happened?
Do you,
Yeah,
do you see what I'm saying? So
yeah,
so that can either, and now all of a sudden there's a knock at the door and it's a cop going, Mr. Williams, we have
Yeah.
those traffic violations. That's what I'm trying to say. We have to stop thinking of everything as a critical incident, or nothing's a critical incident, right?
Right.
So the idea is everything has the potential to be a life or death situation. And some of it might be just your pump stopping while you're going out, so you better have a PFAC, a personal first aid kit, ready to go somewhere, or a AED. Some of it might be your car not starting this morning. How close do we cut stuff, Brian? We cut it real close. Well, hey, that milk will last till tomorrow. And now all of a sudden we have it for whatever. And that's what we do, right? So we go to the lowest common denominator a lot of times. And if we do that in our own life, how do we think now that we're a
Well,
cop that we're going to change? We can't. It
no,
doesn't matter how much training you have. You
and,
are who you are when you're in that uniform, right?
and especially with in that profession who you're typically dealing with on a daily basis,
Right.
it's not generally the the most upstanding members of
You don't
society.
say doctor a lot, right? You don't say,
It's
look, doctor, could you
look,
could you calm
father,
down for a minute?
doctor,
Exactly. You don't say, well, father, I don't know.
yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
no,
so
seriously,
no, no,
you don't say that a lot.
what you're talking about too is just every one of those situations is like the potential energy is always there, and we
Yes.
forget that sometimes.
Yes.
It's not always the kinetic energy. It's not always going to transfer over to that, but it can very easily. I'm very similar to some of the stuff like you are with. It's like, why would you? Someone like my wife would be like, why the hell would you get upset or something like this? I'm like, because this is a simple thing that should not be complex. It should be very
Precisely.
simple to use. And so when it's not, then it basically negates
I
this
took it
whole
personally, though.
it's just it's like it negates the whole
Exactly.
point of having the website and having a computer. Why are we using
Exactly.
this shit if you can't do something so incredibly simple? I'm okay with big, complex, hard problems because man,
Right.
there's not always a right solution and you got to figure it out. But these simple, I'm the same way where I have to take that step back and
Yes.
go, and because my wife is just like, because she's such, a normal human being, is like, why is this, to explain to me why this is upsetting to you? I'm like, I don't do, like, when simple things go wrong, I lose my mind. I can't, because it's like,
Exactly.
why did you,
It's
like, I replaced the outdoor lights here with
right.
ones that come on automatically when it gets to a certain ambient light level
Right.
outside, and then shut off during the day because the girls have problems turning the lights on and off. And then so when one was off, like I literally start, I'm like, why is the front light, why is it off? And my wife is like, Jesus, I'm sorry, I accidentally turned it off when I turned off the inside light. And I'm
Right.
like, I
That
lose my
alone.
mind at that. I
Yep.
go, she goes, you just came in with all this stuff going on, and we had 30 million things, and you handled this and organized this and took Harper over here and solved this and then got back on your
Right.
call all while you're doing that. And I'm like, yeah. I was like, well, that's easy. Those are hard problems. This is simple. So the simple
And
ones.
Brian, you
And
lost
so,
your mind with the
yeah,
electrician because when you
yeah.
got your house,
Oh, he didn't.
the switches were down
The
instead of
pan,
up
yeah,
to
on
be
that
on and
one,
off.
and the panel wasn't marked correctly, and I
Exactly.
almost had an aneurysm. And like my
Exactly.
wife
So
is like,
today,
this is not something. I was like,
but
no, this is a
it's
simple
because
thing that you can
how
go.
humans are wired.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very simple thing
So
that should be done. So
today, Brian, when I looked at that and I'm on my computer and Shelly's on hers and we're sitting a foot apart, I go in to put my Colorado driver's license. So
yeah,
there's a button and it says, what type of ID are you using? And I press driver's license. It's a scroll, right? So then I go and I put my Colorado thing and it says state. And I go through and it has every one of the states except Colorado. I go and I show it to Shelly, and Shelly goes, "Well, just scroll back up and take a
it's
look if
probably at
it's
the
somewhere else."
top.
So when I go, it said driver's license. Guess what the next choice was? Colorado
Yeah,
driver's license. Now, who would plan that? What
yeah,
kind of demented asshole would build a computer program that Greg specifically doesn't understand? But that's what we do. We
yeah.
take it personally.
We
And we're
take it
right
personally.
back that all of a sudden you're in my house and I'm going to
Yeah,
ask you to leave. Why am I asking to leave? Because it's my gosh damn house and I don't want you here. And
yeah,
whatever injustice that I see before me, even though you look at it and say, do you understand how minor this is? I would rather break it
yeah,
or shoot it than let you make fun of it one more second. And that's, we have to understand we're all frightened little children at our core, right?
yeah,
So it's not hard you said it best when you said paint yourself in the corner. And guess what I'm going to do? Brian, there's two things humans do: they act up and we can deal
yeah.
with that. Or they act out.
They act out. Yeah,
Now all of a sudden we got dead people laying all over our kitchen.
right.
Okay, that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. And Brian, it's not binary. And that's a thing that
No,
Pythagoras understood, that cops need to understand, that soldiers and firefighters and everybody else, it's very seldom binary.
no, and we It's not binary. You have options. They might not always be the best options, but
No, but it's
having,
an option nonetheless.
three options is better than having one, right? In some
Yes.
of these highly charged situations, or even how you look at different problems. I mean, we've done that on even business type of calls where someone's
Yes.
like, "Well, I don't know if I see a fit or where and then it's like, well, hang on, why don't we take a look at this?" And then they're like, "Holy crap, I never even thought about it that way. Yeah, you guys could fit in there sooner than we thought because of the," and it's just about
Exactly.
creating those options where, if I'm laser focused in the way, because that person was a extremely intelligent human being and had their own company,
Yep.
but like they were looking at it through their perspective. They were in their house and went, well, that doesn't make sense here, until we said, what about these three things? And they went, oh crap, I never thought of that. And so sometimes creating those
Yes.
options, creating time, creating distance, like you can do that in a number of different ways if I'm going in armed with the ability to know that yes, there's a range of possibilities and things could escalate
And
very
it's going to
quickly.
be
But
fluid, and
but
I got to be light on my feet on
but
this one.
I always look at it, if a situation can escalate that easily, it can likely de-escalate just as easily.
Right.
Meaning,
Right.
if it's one of those, you're saying it's so fluid and so it could go anywhere. Well, that means
Yes.
it can go to a better place too. So
Yes.
sometimes I have to try to lay out those options for other people to choose from, right? And sometimes making you feel that you have
Exactly.
something versus actually get, it's like maybe going to jail at
The
the end of this
semblance
conversation,
here.
but if you
Right.
feel that you have some say in it, then I can get you on board. And that's kind of goes back to one of the stuff that we talk about when we get into cognitive manipulation and what that means. It's not a
Yes.
negative term, but it's just co-opting people to give them choices and give them options, because I'd rather have you on board with it than have us rowing in different directions and trying to see who wins.
You're exactly right. And I would say look for stress fractures in everyday things.
Yeah.
So when you take a look, we default to a family annihilator. And then we say, well, that person was cooked from birth, and they should have saved them a ride to the delivery room and, killed them in the river. Now, what you need to look at is any human given too much stress will reach their limit of human performance and will break. So now all of a sudden, I feel, let's say I'm a man or identify as a man, and I feel emasculated because my wife left me. She's now with another person.
Yep.
I'm now in a shared custody situation.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, we're in that parking lot, and it's a nicer car, and they're dressed nicer, and
Yep.
my daughter's happy for the first time. And Brian, guess what? It turns into a homicide
Yep.
suicide. Okay. We find it hard as humans to look at that and say that could be a spiral. That's where we need to train. We seldom have to train for the mundane. We have to keep our head on a swivel, but nobody ever tells us what
What
types of
that
things to
means.
look for, right? So the idea is that in a combat zone, what are we constantly fighting? Complacency.
Right.
Uh,
You're
remember where you are.
you're
You're
fighting your own natural cognitive tendencies.
exactly. So why wouldn't we use that understanding to prepare ourselves for the hidden unknowns in these very, very dangerous, potentially dangerous situations? Brian, we're talking to firefighters and paramedics. You don't know who's going to bring the match into the house where the
No.
the accelerant and the propellant are already laying out there, right? And now somebody says, "Hey, those are fighting words for me," or they bristle at something. So you really, really have to understand the underpinnings of de-escalation. De-escalation can't just be a thing that you pull out and go, now we're going to de-escalate. It's got to be from pulling up. You pull up with lights and sirens. That's a different level of force for a domestic. You're shining flashlights and banging on the door and police don't move and heightened voices. That changes likely outcomes, just like it could have changed that guy sitting at the intersection with those students walking in front of him and somebody saying or doing the wrong thing or
Yeah.
going and trying to block him in. Brian, so we
Right.
have to plan that now. So when it comes up, knowing what we know now, we have to plan it now and rehearse it now in a safe space. This is what I love about VR and AI. VR and AI is a safe place I can try my hypotheses.
Yeah, you can
And
do
if they
hypothesis
fail,
testing
it's
all
a
day long. Yeah.
avatar that died and I
Yeah.
can reconstitute it.
That's
So
the
so if
point.
you want to ask, what's my opinion on those? I think they're the greatest thing in the world to create that Petri dish where I can try different combinations before I go out on the road.
Yeah, and but that's, failing during training is what you're supposed to be doing most of the time until you get
Yes.
better at it. I mean, that's the
So
whole
what's Hoberman
point.
about? I mean,
Yeah.
if you decide that you
It's
want to go to the Milo website and you want to go and take a look at the Milo cognitive division, you want to take a look deeper and look at Hoberman. That's the whole idea behind that movement is that there are chances and choices. And guess what? Everything that you try, wouldn't it be great to be able to try those? Do you ever see what's that place called, Brian? The where you pull off the freeway. We went to one time because we needed a boot or something like that. Fishing Village,
yeah,
whatever,
yeah, yeah.
big
Bass
Bass
Pro
Pro Shop.
Shops or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
I love those
And so,
places.
okay, we walked in, and there must have been 1,000 fishing lures, and they were all just a different color. Do you remember? And it went
Hmm.
from like that green to hyacinth to this to that, and I was floored. And I was thinking, holy shit, they're taking everything into consideration. Well, if you're going to take into consideration that the water temperature and the color and the spin or vibration and the structure, if all of those things matter in fishing, why wouldn't they matter on this call? Why
Yeah.
wouldn't they matter on this traffic stop? Why wouldn't they matter when you're going to meet your ex at a restaurant? And I say they do. And I say that extra amount of time that you put in thinking and planning for those contingencies and literally rehearsing it. Brian, how many of your friends could you
Yeah.
say, "Hey, I have a business meeting. Could you guys come to coffee with me and I'm going to rehearse my shtick with you?" And you know your friends.
No.
Some of them would be very supportive and some would call you an asshole and make fun of you the whole time. But at least it's a rehearsal.
No, that is funny is I do that with Michaela. I do that when she's got presentation or something big that she has to do, and she'll be like, okay, like, can I go over this with you? I was like, yeah. I was like, well, we'll just look at it simply, like, do me because I brief it back to me with bullet points because I have
Yes,
no idea about any of this stuff. She's like, okay, and so she'll go through do it, and sometimes now she won't even go over it with me because she's got it. She did the thing that she needed to do
that's
now, so
perfect.
she doesn't even actually have to rehearse because she's got,
Yeah.
oh, I did that same thing we did last time. It worked out real well, and I was like, yeah, because you're dumbing it down. Bullet points. These are leadership. They don't
Yep.
need to know big picture. They just want to know what the important thing is. So less is more, and do it this way. You can answer all the questions because you can go into detail about this stuff. But what are the
Exactly.
takeaways you want? She's like, oh yeah, okay. You know what I mean? I'm like, she's like, wow, you're really good at this. I'm like, babe, once again, do you know what I do for a living?
Exactly.
but
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 look at
she's
what we brought up on this
yeah,
call.
yeah,
You and I, when it comes to basic human interactions, we're stymied. We do not understand that low level of complexity thing.
right,
Okay. And we get frustrated by it. But if you and I are in a tense negotiation where people are armed and there's already
yeah,
dead bodies on the
yeah.
ground, we're
Let's
fine.
go. Yeah.
And somebody's going, hey, they just popped smoke and the helo's inbound. And we're
Okay.
going, okay, switch them to channel 3.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
And
so we even have to ask for help in those situations. So it's right for me after this call to call Shelly and say, hey, I was an ass this morning. I'm
yeah.
sorry about it. Now I've waited 3.5 hours to do it. But that's how things get fixed, right? And
Right.
some things
And
are inevitably going to not get fixed.
and
And you got to understand you're not going to be the savior on that day
no.
coming in. You're not going to be the hero in all those
And
situations. So plan for it now.
expectation management,
Yes,
of yourself and the situation. Like, what are you really trying to accomplish here? And let's not go too far, right? There's
exactly.
what's that meme? It's like, hey, you know, there's a lot of people who had some really big goals, and a lot of those people are dead bodies on Mount Everest right now or
Is
something.
this
It's
call
like,
worth
you know,
dying for?
and
Is
that's the
this,
thing,
yeah,
and I just want to kind of reiterate because I think it's kind of good that we're sort of bringing it in for a landing here. But
yeah,
just a couple minutes ago, you said look for stress fractures in everyday things. There
yes,
are always stress fractures showing before the building collapses. Before
always.
there's always something there, and
Yes,
actually most of them in all of these situations are noticeable. It's either someone didn't take the time or didn't know how. So I like how you simply put look for the stress fractures in everyday things. What's weak here in this foundation, right,
yes,
of this situation that I'm going into, that may get worse as I go
yeah.
forward or as more weight gets
And
put onto
stop
it.
thinking about it as a cop or a soldier. Start thinking about it as a parent or a
Right.
lover or a
Yeah.
student. Those stress fractures, that's where it's going to happen. You know what? I haven't gone on Babbel today and done my Spanish. I did it the last 3 days. So I'm going to plan out some time this afternoon because consistency and persistency is how I'm going to learn that. And then you look at that and you go, well, then I've got this and that. And the other. Well, something's got to give. Those are the stress fractures I'm talking about. Because what happens is when you look the other way over time and you put a band aid over that warning light on your engine, Brian, they're not going to get better. And the
Yeah.
little things are what's going to add up and creep up and make the
Right.
mistake and turn it into a crime scene. Yeah, we don't want that.
And that's why, we're all about sort of the thinking points. What are the habits
Yes,
of thought? What are the habits of action? What are these, sort of cognitive skills I can use versus
exactly.
learning how to do something every single time. And that's hopefully came across in this episode.
Yep.
So I do appreciate everyone tuning in. We've got more on our Patreon side.
200,
So please, yes, our
200 episodes.
200th episode.
You're to be
Um,
applauded, man. This is all your idea.
yeah.
Everything grew out of your brain like the Samson hair that you're sporting. So remember
So
Braid Babes. You got to talk to those folks
I
at Braid
know.
Babes. We got to get them to braid you on
Braid my
the
hair.
air live
Yeah, I think
at
that would be cool.
one of our locations. I think it's cool as shit.
Yeah,
I
that would
will
be fun.
pay for the little beads and the rows
I
and everything they put
I
in.
I
I think
think
it'd be great.
they'll be willing to do it for free just to do it and just to take photos and just to put it on social media. I
But
really think they
let's
would.
do it for donations and give that money to a local project or homeless shelter or
Yeah.
domestic violence. The Ronald McDonald House, that's always a good one to donate to. Let's do that, Brian. I would do it,
Yeah.
but you see this mop that I got. I look like a
Right.
televangelist
Well, it
this
just
morning.
won't be long. It won't be a long enough episode to do it
Ah,
if they're braiding your
it's so
hair.
true.
That's all. So,
It's so true.
yeah, no, we do appreciate everyone listening, tuning in.
Yeah.
Like we say, please, if you enjoy parts of the episode or any of the episodes, share it with your friends. Uh, um, get it around. That kind of helps us out quite a bit. We do have our Patreon side, which we've got even more coming up, and they get some behind the scenes scoop and discount on stuff that we have coming up. So it's only a couple bucks a month, and we do our extra stuff and the things that we want to discuss in detail, sort of behind a paywall a little bit to kind of keep the riffraff out and keep it from getting into the wrong hands. At least there's some barrier to entry on that one. So there's a lot on there that you can go back and check out. So we thank everyone for tuning in. Check out the episode details for any of the links to this stuff, and don't forget that training changes behavior.